so much, having me here to the quick housekeeping. Am I talking close enough to the microphone? Can you hear me in the back? Raise your hand. Okay. So I work for Equal Pay Equality, and we are a legal advocacy organization. We advocate for the civil and human rights of people with disabilities. So we help people in special education cases, employment discrimination cases, and civil rights violations. And one of the projects that I manage is the Illinois ADA project, which is a great resource for all of you. We provide information and training to businessmen who, if you have a question about the ADA, you can call us. So I also want to tell you that I'm promoting them, and I sound like I have an accent. And so if you need me to repeat anything I say, please ask me. It does not hurt my feelings. If we also have open captioning up here, it might be hard to see it from the back, so feel free to come up front if you want to see the captioning better. So these are some of the services we provide through the these are some of the services that we provide through the Illinois ADA project. So if any of your organization have a question, feel free to call us, and we'll provide you with the information that you are looking for. Who will help you connect better. Personally, I'm very happy to be here. I spent most of my career working for a not-for-profit organization, and so I know what it's like to be in the trenches in many of the different challenges that you face in trying to achieve your mission. So we're going to hit on some of these different topics, but the PowerPoint is very long, and I don't expect to get through everything, but it's a great resource for you to come back to in Jackson. Know that I'm not planning to rush through that today. Okay, so let's talk about how to make a not-for-profit more welcoming to people with disabilities. We've heard from Rochelle and Emma today about why and some of the ways that we could make not-for-profits more accessible, but let's talk about some of the ways we could actually put that into practice. So so Illinois, you're going to be a mic runner. We were, Rochelle, okay, so what we got that we could do is start with this space that we're in right now. How is this space accessible to people with disabilities? So I'll go first. So first, we have open captioning here, which will be provided by Kathy Beacon, who's looking lovely up here. This is the corner in her leopard print shirt. And so Kathy's typing everything that everybody is seeing today. This is a great tool for you to use if you have a big fundraising event. I know that many of us have put up large events at many of the hotels around town, and it could be hard to hear, but when you have open captioning, you are making your event accessible not just to someone who may be deaf or hard of hearing, but also to other people who might not be able to hear. My mom just got hearing aids. And even though she had a daughter that is deaf, it was still hard for her to realize she needed hearing aids, and so she may not always ask for help. She started to use assistive listening devices, but she also benefits from using open captioning too. So there are always many people in the room who will benefit from accessibility, but they may never actually ask for it themselves. So that is one example of how we made this room more accessible. Now I want to turn it over to you. What is another way that this room is accessible to you? And I'm going to have Rochelle come around with the microphone. So if you want to raise your hand, who wants to go first? All right, I see you here over here.
I'm not sure I need the microphone, but...
But let me address that. Hold on. I'm just gonna address that for a second. So at every single meeting I go to, there's always someone just like you who says, I'm not sure I need the microphone. I talk very loudly, but in fact, it's not about you, it's about the other people who rely on having the amplification from the microphone. So that's why this is a good practice to use for every meeting. So I appreciate that, but there's a lot of other people who depend on the microphone. Right. Okay, go ahead.
Well, as one who uses a cane, it's very nice not have to walk up 7 floors. So having an elevator and no steps into the room made it a lot nicer to get here.
Absolutely. So physical, I'm sorry, what is your name?
Tom.
Tom, okay, so Tom talked about physical access. Absolutely. So when you come into this building, you get a security pass, it'll go right up to the elevator if there are no other barriers. So absolutely that provides access for that of for everyone who needs physical access. And for the rest of us that don't, it's easier to take an elevator. So access benefits everybody because I'm happy not to have to work up 7 flights of stairs to show up here a hospital mess. Right? Okay, so who's next?
I will say that most times when you go to a conference or something like this, the chairs are really close together and the tables are very close together. There's room here for someone to be in a wheelchair. There's places around here. There's just a lot of space around, and we're not packed in here. So.
Yes, so what's your name?
Vanessa.
Okay, so great point. So thinking about how the space is set up and supported. So if someone came here in a wheelchair, you better make sure that the aisle is wide enough for the wheelchair to navigate through. You also got to make sure that the tables are not too close to each other. Right now, from my vantage point, it looks like a tight squeeze. So I would recommend that we move the tables around and maybe leave some openings. So that is what we need to think about how to change the squeeze. And I find that's true for out of the front music events where other tables could be packed together. Sometimes it's hard for me to walk through, so I know that for a wheelchair you will not be able to access them. So we gotta be intentional about how we set up that space. So thank you, Vanessa. I see here up here.
This one's kind of related, and I don't know, but are these table heights okay if you were in a chair, or they seem a little low to be able to get into and really work on?
Yeah, so that's what I think about is have table heights. You may better have a variety of table heights. I don't know the height of them here, but sometimes some people need higher tables. I know that at a lot of events, there's always high tables, which are terrible for people who use wheelchairs. Yet I have a friend who's a little person, she hates it because the tables are so much higher than her, so she can't engage with people in the same way. So you better think about having a variety. So that is something to think about. I think I see it here to the back.
Besides being involved in ESC, I also participate at Northwestern University in a program called the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. Many of the people in this continuing education program are seniors, older, like many of us. And recognizing that the fact that people as they grow older have more difficulty in hearing things, Osher in all of the classrooms provide a series of microphones that are sitting on the tables and broadcast so people have an easier opportunity to hear. It's taking advantage of knowing who your audience is and being responsive to that and sensitive to their needs.
That's a great point. So my mom takes classes in LLI too, so I'll have to ask her afterwards if you know her. But it's true, how do we, as people that music they're hearing, how do we make sure that we can hear each other? What kind of access do you need? But also do you need video recorded, which provides an opportunity for people who are not able to be here today. But also maybe people who it would be hard for them to travel here, or be around other people. So what we, that what people are to prepare to created a success list is you could make the caption transcript available to people at home if you could even stream it live at the same time. So that's what we to make it more accessible. I see what other comment up here. Any other comments? Okay, so those are some ways that we need, that's thinking. So those are some ways that this space is accessible. There's a couple other ways that it's not accessible. For example, this stage, this podium is raised. There's no ramp, so if you have someone that needs physical access, they will not be able to actually get up at this stage. And you also want to have a variety of ways to present. If you're in a wheelchair, this is not accessible because this podium is taller than you. So you may want to instead have everybody sit at a table so that it's even. For people who are blind to low vision, you want to have materials available in alternate formats or advanced documents so then screen readers could read them. And also be flexible. So many times when you get a request or an accommodation, it's easy to freak out because you may not be familiar with what it is. And sometimes it is strictly to say no. So I would encourage you not to say no, but instead to say, what do I know, what do I not know, not to be afraid to engage with a person with a disability, is say, how could we help you, what kind of access do you need, and how could we provide that accommodation for you, because that person is making a decision that they want to participate in what the organization has to offer, and so you have an opportunity to make sure that they have the same opportunity to participate. So I thought it would be helpful to talk about disability etiquette. Everybody learning and picking up new vocabulary. So this is a good way to think about that. So first, make sure that you use appropriate terminology because that shows respect. It's not about being politically correct, saying the right it's about showing that you respect that terminology. For example, we now say intellectual disability. The word retarded is no longer appropriate to use. It is a person to use that, so make sure you use appropriate terminology. The other word that we no longer use is handicap, but many times I hear people talk about handicap parking spaces. So the way to take that word out of vocabulary is to use the word accessible. So accessible parking spots, not handicap. Then in the disability community, we use people first language. So put the person first instead of defining them by their disability. So you would say a person with epilepsy, a person who is deaf, a person who is hard of hearing, a person who is blind. But then also don't add judgmental language that victimizes the person. So you would want to say a person living with ease, not a victim of ease. Not someone who suffers from ease. You may also hear this with the word wheelchair. You want to see wheelchair bound. Nobody is bound to a wheelchair. People who use wheelchairs use them in a variety of ways. If they cannot transfer from a wheelchair to another chair, nobody is bound to a wheelchair all the time. And a lot of times what would be helpful if we see someone who may be moving or communicating in a way that's different than how we might act. So before you take action, ask someone if you need help. Say, do you need anything? Can I help you? Sometimes if we have someone who's blind come to my office, we will say, I will go up to them and say, do you need an elbow? And then they will touch my elbow and I'll explain how to get out of my office. But they might be okay to Then if you meeting someone who's blind, it's appropriate to say your name and say, hi, this is Rachel speaking, so that they can identify who they're talking to. And then at other times, people they don't need to, but they could be patronizing about disability. So today I took the train to Consortium. It would be like if someone said to me, wow, that was so amazing. You got out of train by yourself to come downtown. You know, I got up in the morning and I need my coffee just like anybody else. So I'm not exceptional of getting out of the train and using public transportation. Another tip is that if someone had a service animal who have wheelchair or other device, don't eat or don't touch the service animal is considered part of their personal space. We all have different definitions of our own personal space. In the service animals of Roki, I'm a big dog person, but I know them not to touch a service animal or pet them unless I specifically will give it permission. If it's even a wheelchair, if you wish to hear that someone's wheelchair is like touching part of their body or personal space, so make sure to respect that space. And then we often get sort of caught up in how I would use the right terminology. What do I say? Like sometimes people who know the name will say, did you hear that great movie with the thing? But you can't hear. It's okay, that is not about me. What I say to a blind person, I'll see you later. I should say that. It's okay, relax about that. Are there any quick questions about that? No, okay, I'm gonna go on. So I'm gonna put on my royal hat for a second. So I'm going to talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I'm sure, has everybody heard of the ADA provision here? And so, the ADA, the Civil Rights Law, then provides equal access to people with disabilities. And the ADA has 5 titles. The first title is Title 1, which is employment. I practice employment, but I'm not going to get into that today, except to say if you have an opportunity to hire a person with a disability, make sure that you check yourself on any assumptions you might have about that person's abilities. I'll be honest with you, people with disabilities are the best problem solvers around. We have to think about solutions to problems every single day. For example, when I was invited by Rochelle to come here, I had to think, how do I make this event accessible to me? Every nice suggestion, we have PABSS. Every day I face some kind of communication access barrier, and I have to figure out how to solve that problem. People with disabilities solve problems every day, and that is such a great skill to have at your team. So that's, the accommodation, now people get overwhelmed by thinking, I'm going to have to provide accommodation. It's not that hard. Maybe you just need a little bit of information, but make sure to take the time to explore that before you decide, before you not let any bias get in the way. So some parts of the ADA that may apply to you. If you get any money from state or local government sources, you will have to follow Title 2 of the ADA. So whether it's through a grant or whether you directly can money, know that you are obligated to meet those legal applications. And then if you have, if there's the legal organization open, you will call the place of public accommodation. So under Title 3, you have to provide accessibility. That there are also some stated local laws that you should be aware of. So the Illinois Human Rights Act protects against discrimination based on disability at the Chicago Human Rights Witness and here the Cook County Human Rights Witness also provide the same protections. And then in terms of physical action, the Illinois Environmental Barriers Act requires that please be accessible as enforced by the Attorney General's office. So let's talk about accessibility. So this is the general rule visual representation that there could be no discrimination in the full and equal enjoyment of goods, services, facilities, privileges, or accommodation. So that's a pretty broad definition. And to me, when I read that, it tells me how do we make this accessible for anyone to come and be a part of what I have to offer. Here, so sometimes that means they do modify your policies, your procedures. You would be not to do that when meaning we would fundamentally alter the nature of the services provided, but that's a very high barrier. So look on how you can modify what you offer, for example, this will be considered a modification to provide the capacity. So one thing that comes up that is effective communication. So think about how you could provide access, for example, to someone who is deaf and hard of hearing. For example, the type of communication will be different if you go to a store to buy something you could probably buy with very close. Right, if you go to Starbucks, you could write out an order at Starbucks. But if you have a meeting at the doctor's office, it may not be enough to write nose back up. You may need captioning or sign language interpreter or other effective communication. In another, this would be different if you go to a live play. It's not going to be enough to write nose back up during the play because you could have missed so much. So you better think about different ways to provide that access. So these are some examples of different ways to provide accessibility for people who are deaf and hard of hearing and who are blind. But this is not the furthest. So that's a good resource. And then another we want to think about for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, because then many people who are deaf will use the video service to cause you a conversation. How many people here are familiar with the video service, Rochelle is? So it almost looks like Skype, because I know sign language. I could call the video service and I could see a picture, I could see a video of the sign language interpreter who would then help me to make the call. So you'll hear the voice of a sign language interpreter. And sometimes there's usually a little bit of a delay going back and forth. So sometimes when the position's receptionist might hear that this is a video call, they think that it's Talmunkadi, but it's not. It's a person who was trying to access your services. So it's a good thing to explain or train your staff on. Other people who may not know sign language use a caption telephone, which uses voice recognition software to type out what is being said. It is a great tool. The state of Illinois will provide that for you for free if you need it. But there's also a little bit of a delay, so just be a little bit patient at the phone, but don't turn away the person at the phone. So these are all good ways to make sure to train your staff on. But here are some resources, but if you have specific questions, feel free to email me. Is anybody here a cultural organization? Do you provide plays, music? And so in Chicago we have a great organization called the Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. Here Chicago is brought together different cultural administrators to make Chicago one of the most accessible cities in the world. I think we are the most, but I know and different cultural administrators around the city are so committed to making sure that anybody can come and see a play or live music or museums. So that's there's some innovative things happening here. So that's a great resource to check out too. Many people access representation through the website. So you better make sure that the social media is accessible. Don't just, for example, if you put a video on Facebook, don't just rely on YouTube or Facebook to provide the automatic captions. Go in and edit the caption. I'm sure sometimes you see automatic captions where they don't sound right. That's because they weren't edited. And if you don't edit them, you miss a great opportunity to market your organization because the person is going to be looking at the captions, mistakes, instead of looking at how you present it as, and then for people who are applying to new vision, there's a lot of great tools, and so you can use alt text to add description to the image, and then make sure to have your website tested so that it's accessible to people who use screen readers. The social media. So when you have an event, I always recommend putting the invitation, add this to your invitation. If you have any accessibility need, here through the call, here's my email address. Putting that at the event information will show that you thought about people with disability and you want to welcome people with disability. It's not that many words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8 words, but it sends a powerful message to say people want to hear. If you have if university site is possible, for example, having an elevator is considered university site because the accessibility here is for everybody. The captioning up on the screen is for everybody. If you can add that, you will go without making sure everybody can participate. It's also helpful to send a note before you go, email before your event, so people know about accessibility provided and they can reach out with any questions. I see. Here's some other tips too. And I also have a handout from the Chicago Community Trust. It's a great resource for you to go through. Here's Eva Penner who put that together. She's willing to answer any questions too, but I think that's a great resource. And then one final point is Michelle talked about service animals. As Michelle said, there's a lot of confusion about service animals. I encourage you to check out these slides, and especially this slide number 29, which explains the only 2 questions you can ask about service animal, which is number 1, whether the service animal is required because of a disability, yes or no. If the answer is yes, the second question that you are allowed to ask from the Justice Department of what task the animal has betrayed the program. So with Michelle, please, the animal has betrayed help her daughter with different behaviors. Stop, will stop, that's it, okay, cool. That's what the police officer should have done. They should have walked away. And discussions of Maystein has some great resources about service animals, but if you follow those rules, those 2 questions, you will make things a lot easier and make things a lot easier for people who depend on using service animals. So I'm out of time, and I do not want to keep anybody from the next break. So, but I feel free to email me. My email is on the back. Is on the last slide. Is on the last slide, and I've included a lot of great resources, but I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you so much for having me.